Welcome to Copilot Podcasts. Picture this. You're 7 years old, you finish your cereal, and you realize you didn't leave enough milk for your little brother. So you pour your used milk back into the gallon and put it in the fridge. That's not just being a bad sibling, that's survival instinct in a house where resources are scarce and adults aren't really adulting. Today, we're diving into Brad's stories about growing up with his brother Steven, 2 years apart, navigating a childhood that swung between normal sibling chaos and genuine family dysfunction. You'll understand how brothers can protect each other through trauma and what it really means to survive your childhood together. Let me bring in someone who's been thinking deeply about these family dynamics.
What strikes me immediately about these stories is how they start so normally. Brad and Steven wrestling around, Steven face-planting and messing up his front teeth, both getting braces. That's just regular sibling stuff.
Right, but even in those early moments, you can see the cracks. Like Steven sitting down on the floor in grocery store aisles whenever their mom stopped to look at something. That's not normal kid behavior.
Exactly. And then you have these moments that should be pure childhood joy, like when their dad surprised them by setting up Grand Theft Auto San Andreas in their bedroom. They came in to find it hooked up and ready to play, completely shocked and excited.
But then in the same breath, you have their dad telling them to put a BB gun on their tongue because it doesn't hurt. Brad trusted him, and his dad literally shot him in the tooth, chipping it.
That's the whiplash of this childhood. 1 minute you're getting Pokemon figures for Christmas, the next minute you're waiting in the car for an hour while your parents donate plasma for money.
And through all of this, Brad and Steven are just together, building terrible scooter ramps out of couch cushions that compress when you try to use them.
The whole Pokemon figure thing really shows how parents tried to maintain normalcy even when everything else was chaotic. But what really gets me is the wrestling program at Fort Benning.
Oh, the Black Knights Youth Wrestling Club. 3.5-hour drives to tournaments. Sounds wholesome until you learn that their mom was giving both boys Steven's Adderall before competitions.
Wait, Steven's Adderall? So she was medicating one kid and then giving his medication to both of them for athletic performance?
That's exactly what happened. And this is when Brad was 10, 11, and Steven was 8, 9. These are little kids being given stimulants by their mother.
It's like every normal childhood experience got twisted. Even their pets, they each had mice, but Brad's mouse kept killing Steven's mouse. The parents would just replace Steven's mouse without telling him.
And both mice eventually died anyway, eaten by fleas from their cat, Ms. Kitty. It's almost metaphorical. Even their attempts at normal pet ownership got consumed by neglect.
The turtle story really captures this. They each had one, the dog bit one when they took it outside to play. So these kids, probably around 9 and 11, decide to take the injured turtle to a creek in the woods to either live or die.
They're saying goodbye to this turtle when they hear their mom screaming their names from the backyard. They come running back trying to explain, and then they take the other turtle to release it in a pond on the military base.
These kids are making life and death decisions about animals because the adults in their lives aren't capable of handling basic pet care, but they're doing it together.
That's the thread through all of this. They're together. Even in the playground chicken fighting where Brad kicked his dad in the nuts and won, Steven was there watching his older brother take on their father.
And then everything changes. The affair, the family split. Brad is 13, 14, Steven is 11, 12, and they're watching their dad jump off the roof to fight their mum's boyfriend, Carl.
Brad and Steven watched from the window with Uncle Ryan. Brad was crying. That image, 2 kids watching their father literally jump off a roof to start a fight, that's the moment childhood officially ended.
The way Brad protected Steven during the rooftop fight by crying while watching shows how trauma bonds siblings differently than normal shared experiences. After that, Steven moved back with their dad, Brad stayed with Mum and Carl.
But they kept finding each other. When Steven would visit, they'd walk to gas stations with their mom, who would offer Brad a 40-ounce as payment. They're teenagers being offered alcohol by their mother.
And they started rolling cigarettes from butts they found around the house while their aunt and her boyfriend took turns smoking crack in the bathroom a few feet away.
The normalization of chaos is stunning. They're going to neighbors Chris and Margie's house to smoke blunts and play Call of Duty Zombies. Brad's babysitting all the kids and getting paid in cheap cigarettes.
Their criminal activities weren't rebellion, they were survival mechanisms in a world where adults had completely abdicated responsibility, like when they broke into the warehouse behind their house.
Brad had been breaking into vehicles there solo, but then he, Steven, and someone else broke into the main warehouse. They smashed fluorescent lights and fought with the broken pieces like swords.
It's like they're creating their own adventure stories because no one's providing them with actual structure or activities. They're stealing blunt roaches from neighbors' ashtrays at night.
And smoking spice at the dinner table with their mom, aunt, and grandmother. Brad got so nauseous he ran to the back deck trying to throw up, and everyone thought he was trying to jump off.
The fact that his family's first thought was suicide attempt rather than drug reaction tells you everything about the level of crisis they were living in daily.
By the time they're living in that shed bedroom, plywood floors, metal walls, extension cords running 20 feet from the house, they're basically feral teenagers.
But still together. throwing footballs over power lines, doing the invisible rope prank on cars until a man with a gun told them, "That's how you get yourself fucked up, partner."
That invisible rope prank is such a classic teenage thing. You think you're so clever until someone with a gun shows up. They were also drop-kicking mailboxes while walking around at night.
And Brad and Morgan would mess with Stephen while they were all high, telling him he was in a bubble and they couldn't hear him while he was tripping out on spice.
Even in their dysfunction, there's this weird sibling dynamic. Brad's still the older brother, still looking out for Stephen, but also participating in this chaos.
Then comes the arrest. Mid-October 2013, Brad, Stephen, and an 18-year-old named Candace break into an abandoned building that later became Chattahoochee Paddle Company.
Silent alarm. Police already on the way. All three arrested for third-degree burglary. Candace did 2 days and 3 nights in jail because she was 18.
Brad and Stephen had to pay fines and take classes. Their Aunt Angie paid for them. At this point, Stephen is 15, 16, Brad is 17, 18. This could have been the thing that destroyed their futures.
But somehow they survived it. Fast forward to March 2015, the whole chaotic family comes to Arizona for a Renaissance fair to meet Brad's baby and see him after months apart.
13 people: Mom, Carl, Stephen, Alyssa, Marilyn, Mike, Taylor, Jason, Madeline, Emily, and Emily's mum. Brad describes it as overall a cool experience despite the chaos of 13 people.
That phrase, despite the chaos, it's like chaos is just the baseline expectation for any family gathering. But they're still showing up for each other.
And here's what really gets me. In 2026, Stephen is 28, living with Mum and Carl in Texas, working at HEB. He's one of the only family members Brad still talks to.
After everything, the trauma, the drugs, the arrest, the family dysfunction, these brothers maintain their connection. Stephen moved to Texas sometime in 2025, but they're still in contact.
It's remarkable when you think about it. 2 years apart, went through all of this side by side, from wrestling as little kids to watching the world fall apart from that window.
From smoking together and getting arrested together to staying in touch across state lines as adults. That's the real story here, not the chaos, but the bond that survived it.
You know what strikes me most? In all these stories, even the worst ones, they're together. When Brad's crying at the window watching their dad fight, Stephen's right there. When they're breaking into warehouses, they're doing it together.
Even when they're being stupid teenagers, the mailbox kicking, the invisible rope prank, they're not alone. In a world where every adult has failed them, they had each other.
And that's probably what saved them both. Not the system, not the adults, not intervention programs, just the fact that neither of them had to go through it alone.
The cereal milk incident from the beginning, that wasn't just being a bad sibling. In a house where resources were scarce, Brad was already learning to think about Stephen's needs, even as a 7-year-old.
Exactly. And when you look at where they are now, Stephen working at HEB, Brad having moved away but staying in contact, they both made it out. They both became functioning adults despite everything.
That's the real miracle here. Not that they survived their childhood, but that they survived it together and maintained that bond into adulthood.
When you step back from all these stories, what you see is 2 kids who protected each other through absolute chaos. They made terrible decisions, but they made them together.
And in a world where every adult had abandoned their responsibilities, these brothers created their own family unit. They were each other's constant.
The fact that Stephen is one of the only family members Brad still talks to tells you everything. After all the trauma, all the dysfunction, all the ways their family failed them, the sibling bond endured.
So here's what this really comes down to. Sometimes the most important relationship in your life isn't with a parent or a spouse. Sometimes it's with the person who was in the trenches with you from the beginning.
Brad and Stephen's story shows us that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, and who helps you survive the unsurvivable.
From that 7-year-old pouring his cereal milk back into the gallon to 2 adult brothers staying in touch across state lines, that's not just survival. That's love in its most resilient form.
And maybe that's the lesson here. In the middle of chaos, in the absence of proper parenting, in the face of trauma and dysfunction, human connection can still flourish.
Thanks for joining us on Copilot Podcasts.